Hi, this is Bob Samuels, founder of TechConnectr. TechConnectr is a marketplace and campaign management platform of best-of-breed account-based marketing lead generation solutions. We've partnered with the B2B Sales and Marketing Exchange to bring you wisdom from leading account-based marketing thought leaders. To that end, I'm happy to introduce you to Christopher Engman, Chief Revenue Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of Proof Analytics. He's also author of the book Mega Deals: How Multi-Billion-Dollar Deals Are Done. Christopher, it's a pleasure to speak with you. How are you today?
Great. Yeah, likewise. I'm doing really well. Had a wedding yesterday, not my own, but visited a wedding here in Portugal. We're here for that wedding and for a quick holiday.
I'm jealous. And you have a few family members with you?
I do, yeah. I have a bunch of kids and my wife, and we're also here with another family. So usually I have both an assistant and an au pair, so pretty nice. But this time we decided that none of them would follow, which was probably some kind of mistake. No, I mean, it's a really nice time with the kids, but it's kind of 100% kids.
Sounds like a great bonding opportunity. Thank you for cutting out some time for us. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah.
So could you give our audience a little bit of your background about marketing ABM in particular?
Yeah, so got into marketing around larger deals maybe around 2000 when I started my first software company. It was enterprise software, and I was selling into the big retailers like the Tesco's and the big fashion retailers and all those, and realized how easy it was to get, if you really go for it, how easy it was to get meetings with the right people, but then how hard it was to go from there to closing a deal. And then I managed to, I had to pause a bit in my entrepreneurial career. I was a CIO and head of customer loyalty for a big fashion retailer. So I was all of a sudden on the buying side, and I saw with my own eyes what happens around the larger deals and how the decision making is really going. And on the surface, you want to show that you're really fact-based, but in reality, it's lots of politics, various agendas, much more people involved than you think, and the budget owner is rarely a sole decision maker. Many junior salespeople think it's, yeah, we're talking to the right person, he or she's making the decision. Like, yeah, sure. So, and I was a CIO. I was part of the C-suite, even though I was only 26. I was pretty young, but I had on paper lots of budget responsibility, but in reality, I decided very little. So things like that were big realizations for myself, and to some extent, prior to that, my first company that sold into retail, kind of, yeah, it's a successful company today, but myself, I didn't succeed well with it. And one of the reasons was that I couldn't scale enterprise sales and marketing. So I had a lot of sales team members, but I ended up having to sell myself all the time. So I couldn't scale it. In the beginning, I thought I was particularly good, but after a while, I realized, no, I suck. If I can't scale this, it's game over. So, and we actually failed the first time, so we had to start over, and second time it worked out. But that was kind of the context for me that led me, and then I started another enterprise software company. We don't have to go into that, but that was also mostly selling into partner-owned companies, and that decision making is even trickier with again, agendas and stuff.
So that's yeah. I was going to say, as far as ABM goes, I get.
Sorry. BT moment. My daughter just. She's going. You can probably cut that out. She's coming in wanting to cuddle. Like.
That was cute. Oh, I want to cuddle.
So ABM, the word takes me out sometimes because often it's not so much about marketing to try to get new prospects, but actually getting deeper into customers that are already on board and land and expand.
Of course, yeah. Oh yeah. No, land and expand is land and expand. That's where you have the big money.
So what's the hard part, the landing or the expanding?
No, it's typical. So, well, both are equally difficult, but the big money is in the expanding. It's so just to finish off my story. That actually led to me starting a company called Vendemore. We started in November 2007. It was more or less the same. I mean, few days as Demand Base started. So we're kind of the first product ABM companies in the world. And we got eventually over 100 Fortune 500 companies. Unfortunately, well, I don't regret it because I had to get my first kind of few $1 million, but I sold it too early, and the buyer, I don't think they did a phenomenal job in developing it further. But that's maybe a personal opinion. But anyway, we were pretty successful. We got and a lot of American companies worked with us, both in Silicon Valley, in Boston area, and New York, etc. And we were particularly good at really large companies doing ABM. Anyway, yeah, going back to your question, so account-based marketing is particularly good in two out of the three big phases. So if you take from awareness to closing your first deal with a completely new account, that's phase one. Phase two is to take that, to take that again. So the phase one is to go from unaware into becoming a lead, then to going from lead into becoming a deal, and then to go from a deal to, like you said, land and expand, kind of expand that deal. ABM is particularly good at the second, the last two. So it's not phenomenal for lead generation, especially if you calculate the cost per lead. If you use that metric, ABM will come out pretty flat. If you look at the win rate per account, ABM is phenomenal. It's more expensive than many lead generation activities that you do, but it has a higher win rate. And some of the reasons why account-based marketing really works in the enterprise sales world is that, first of all, that 5.7 decision makers. In our research around the Mega Deals book, that's a kind of, I don't know where they got that number. It's not true. It's simply not true. In enterprise deals, there are much larger amount of people involved. Maybe if you sell some simple SaaS stuff, that's easier. But and well, as a side note, SaaS doesn't mean it can't be enterprise. SaaS is often enterprise, but as soon as you go into enterprise style deals that are more complex, you have vast groups of people that you need to get on board, not necessarily to sign the deal, but you don't want them to object to what you're trying to achieve. So you need to run a pretty significant consensus game to get people aligned. And salespeople are typically pretty bad at that. They're kind of by default speaking to a too small amount of people. And especially the junior ones, they go back to the head of sales saying, yeah, Bob, I had a meeting now with Mrs. or Mr. X at this company, and she was really positive. I think we'll close the deal with them. As a senior sales leader, you're like, right. Because you know that from having one person signaling an interest until you have a signed contract, that's a pretty long journey. So, and typically quite a few people involved. So those kind of areas are great for ABM, and the decision groups are way bigger. The lobby groups around the deal are way bigger than any of the Gartners and the guys are saying. Our research is showing that constantly. Also, larger deals are a lot about mitigating risk and being trustworthy as a vendor. So what we've seen in our research is that most big companies prefer to buy from a secure vendor rather than the extra bells and whistles. So you can come as a smaller company, and this is a bit of the struggle. And here ABM can play a big role for small companies. So as a small company, you can, and I'm a part of such a company, so I'm an investor in 12 companies, and one of them has a phenomenal product. I mean, they really wipe the floor with some of the biggest names in the IT industry, but they're small, and they suffer from that so much. They look risky, even though if you look at the functionality demands, they have a comply on all of them, but that doesn't matter. They don't win enough anyway because they're losing on the credibility side. So risk being a low risk alternative is immensely important in larger deals, and this is a spot where branding and marketing can really play a role, because you can reduce this perceived risk by really good marketing, and especially if you do it at scale within the target organization and some of the ecosystem around that organization.
So it sounds like, especially for smaller or newer companies, it makes sense to be more specific on the target company size that they should be going after.
Yeah, I mean, as
maybe
a
mid-market as opposed to mega market.
Exactly, like that's a good conclusion. So to build your way up, you should start with mid-market. I mean, the small SMB are typically not capable of paying enough, so you should go for the kind of 50 to 1,000 employees and try to really gain momentum there, and then you start to move the needle up step by step once you've gained credibility, because they're so, and I think you guys listening to this, I'm sure you've come across this a ton of times. So trying to sell into a big brand, they're really pragmatic. They're like, okay, so who else have you sold to in our industry? And you go, yeah, but you have similar needs as our other clients coming from this other industry. They're like, no. And you're as an entrepreneur, you can be a bit more wide thinking, but then the buyer is like, no, I don't see a resemblance. Like, we have nothing to do with an airline. You're like, yeah, but it's the same problem. Like, it doesn't matter. We're not an airline. So, and I'm sure you Bob have seen this as well.
So a lot of your advice is to know your target audience, and don't waste your time where it's just going to be hard work. It's going to be just a struggle. And maybe work your way up there, right? I mean, just build up to it.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think it's important some people say you should never give up, but that can be bad advice. Like, the best salespeople we've studied in the mega deals research are great at exiting early. So when they speak to you, they have their checklist, and you're not ticking all the boxes. They exit. They just, in a subtle way, move out, and they go for the next company. And the high performers in sales are having this behavior, and that is definitely, to your point, applicable to the selection of clients. Like, if you are a smaller company, even though it's tempting to immediately go for the Bank of America of the world, but don't. Just gain momentum in the mid-market, and then you gradually move up.
Okay, fair enough. So for a company that's larger, or a company that's ready to move up and they're ready to go after the big folks, you mentioned there's a lot of decision makers, a lot of people you have to reach out to. So there's arguably dozens of different key stakeholders to reach out to. And different personas, I assume, and different pain points, or different focuses, maybe security or cost or extensibility or whatever. So how do you identify who the right people are and what to talk about?
So this might be a bit boring advice, but I think in the choice between being exactly to the point with the various personas. So to summarize it a bit, I think it's more scalable and more effective to focus on the pain points for the account in the marketing program. Whereas in sales, you're more persona oriented. So I've seen during my 10 years at Vendemore, where we worked with over 100 Fortune 500 companies, I saw way too many companies being over sophisticated when it came to the analysis of the stakeholders, and then trying to craft unique messages per the different type of personas, that they failed on the execution. So my strong recommendation is to, when doing ABM, is to start with the display advertising and the social media. So the 4 social media channels kind of ABM, where you're very media based and you focus mostly on the accounts pain points, whereas salespeople can take it one step further. Because the issue with account-based marketing is that it's in theory perfect, but in practice it's imperfect. So what is a struggle is that marketing teams are speaking too little to sales teams, and also even if they do, to execute account-based marketing becomes really heavy unless you make a few brutal choices. So my recommendation is to to actually not overinvest in the persona specific messaging in the marketing programs, but use that instead in sales.
That's smart.
I know that a lot of people would say I'm wrong, but this is definitely my experience. And I think what really gives you bang for the bucks is to get account-based marketing to become an inherent part of your daily work and to get it to scale through your international organization. So it becomes an integral part of what you do. And to reach that point, you need to simplify it a bit. And when overdoing it, like we could spend this talk on the most sophisticated stuff you can do around account-based marketing, but that is not profitable for 99% of all the listeners.
So
the big money
like you
is
said, for simple.
And sorry, what did you say, Bob?
I said there's a lot to be said for simple.
Yeah. I think it's the same in our books, the mega deals that we're just launching. The ABM chapter. So we've interviewed. So I started Vendemore, but then we've interviewed people from the big ABM vendors, but also many of the known analysts around from the account-based marketing space, both from Sirius, Forrester, Gartner, and the others. But we've chosen to, in that chapter, describe it in a very pragmatic way so that the readers can implement it. I've seen recommendations on account-based marketing implementations that are mostly like, okay, it's really cool to say this, but no one can run it. so my view is more pragmatic. Like it's what makes things successful is to get it into a habit. When you do it, when you excel at it, and it's becoming a habit of yours and a habit of your organization, and not just your team, but across countries, etc., then you make some serious money on doing it. And then you need to package it and simplify it a bit. Sorry for that long monologue.
Thank you. So as far as the human side of this, how do you see the coordination between sales and marketing? Who does that well? Does sales drive it? Does marketing drive it? How do you get buy-in?
Right.
And coordination?
So this is an experience, but we've seen it both in the research, and I also know this is when we're running Vendemore. So often you benefit from having marketing lead account-based marketing, but have, for example, content creation. Don't start within the marketing team. What you do instead is you have meetings with sales and you try to figure out what's on the agenda of these accounts. So let's say you're responsible for 3 accounts. What's their different agendas? And also, what kind of stories can we make that fit that agenda?
Yes. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So, for example, both in Climon and earlier, and where I ran sales and marketing for 2 years and grew it from $3 to $90 million. So we started, all the content creation was centered around the salespeople. So let's assume you were responsible for British Steel. Then we would expose you in videos and articles, and you would be also the ID generator of the content. Then obviously marketing people have different toolboxes and skills, so marketing can add significant value, but the original stories came from you. And then the main character in the stories, whether it was videos or articles, again, was you. So what happened was that the account representatives, when they went out to see people in those targeted accounts, they were perceived as film stars. So all of a sudden you come into a meeting, you notice that everyone in the room, they feel that they know you. You haven't seen them. So effects like that. So so use the people on the ground, put them in media, use them as the front figures, and don't make the mistake of using only the named spokespersons like the CEO and the COO and the CFO in that kind of communication. Use the people that that particular account will meet. So we did that really well at Climon during the last 2 years, and we're developing that now at Proof, where I run sales and marketing now, and I'm also the lead investor.
That's smart. So going back to your role as the decision maker, or at least an influencer when you were on the IT side, or as you are, what works when marketers want to reach out to you, when salespeople want to reach out to you? Are you wanting them to reach out to the lower level people first, the managers, to get their buy-in first, or go directly to you? And then should they call you? Should they email you? Should they send you web stuff?
Right. So what really annoyed me when I was a CIO at a big fashion retailer was even the biggest names in the market reached out to me with the 2 junior persons, some kind of pre-sales. And this is, by the way, a big mistake. I don't believe in that. I think if you want to reach into your most prioritized accounts, don't put someone that starts to stutter when they reach the right person. So I got really annoyed when they didn't know who we were. They couldn't. I asked them, so what do you know about retail? And they're like, not much. But in general, what we've seen in the research, and that probably applies to myself as well, even in Proof, we're only 24 people, but I want salespeople to reach out to people below me, because I don't have time to filter everything. But then I also want my team to filter, so they don't, because some people just say like, oh, here are all my details to my boss, and send him an email, and then some kind of shit email comes through, and then my team member hasn't done a good job in filtering out things that aren't relevant. So, but it's one simple thing to get a high response rate, and you've probably seen this as well, Bob. Like, as soon as you can speak about that industry, so the industry specificity, say, talk about the big names in that industry, what are the big trends and all that, then all of a sudden the receiver, what kind of, regardless if it's a phone call or a marketing item of some kind, it realizes that you know what you're talking about, and then all of a sudden you're so interesting. Like I mean, a lot of Indian outsourcing companies are still sending emails where they list 23 capabilities like C#, Azure, blah 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 blah. They're just listing IT capabilities, and then they're asking for a meeting. You're like, right. So knowing about the industry, but also mentioning a few words about the company where you work, like, I mean, the company you're targeting, so that you show the receiver that you've spent the time researching them. What we've seen in our mega deals research is that it's really relevant to try to figure out what the key initiatives are of the target account. So what are the top 3 to 5 key initiatives? If you can hit one of those with your offering, then your hit rate is tremendously higher. So, and those are often described in the annual report. So by just scanning the annual reports, you can figure out what the target accounts is having as a key strategy and what their programs are that are backing up the strategy. And by then figuring out if you fit into one of those programs, then you can have a really fast track into significant deals. But if you go into a company where what you're selling doesn't touch upon any of their key initiatives, you should probably exit and don't even spend time with them. And this is also behavior of the best, like highest performing mega dealers. They are really good at both through quick research, annual reports, but also in the first interactions with the customer, actually working to exit the discussion instead of, so we intentionally use the word disqualify instead of qualify. So you want to disqualify early because it's better to happen to disqualify too much than too little, because in the larger deal world, each sales cycle is so expensive that you need to prioritize really hard. And then once you have qualified them, then you spend a lot of money on ABM and you pull in various resources from your company to team up around the potential deal. But before that, you don't spend much money. Again, going back to the last two phases where ABM really makes sense. So so not to lead generate, but to actually, like, okay, it's not just a lead. It's not an MQL, it's not an SQL, it's beyond that. So we have now spoken to the customer and we really feel that this is a fit and we should start to allocate money towards this opportunity. Then you start to do some serious account-based marketing.
Yeah. So good advice. It sounds like in the outreach, don't use your junior people. Go use your strong salespeople. Do your homework. Know the industry very well. Have some solutions for the industry. Know the prospects' hot points or their projects. So how do you find out what their projects are? I mean, they don't list them on the web anywhere.
Well, most public companies and many large deals are done with big companies, and many of the big companies are public. So most public companies have annual report that you can download. And in the annual reports, you typically have a CEO letter and you have some pages about strategy. And quite often you find this kind of information in there. So sometimes you need to do what we call research calls. You need to call people within that account on lower levels to try to figure out what the main initiatives are, or the key initiatives. And people often know this because they're so important for that company that they are communicating about these key initiatives frequently. So the C-suite is communicating frequently about them. They're monitoring them on various monthly internal meetings and stuff. So it's actually not too tricky to find them out. I mean, it's different to when you target smaller companies, they probably don't even have key initiatives. But once you target the bigger companies, then you'll notice that it's not so hard to figure out. And still most salespeople and marketeers are not even checking the annual reports. So if there's one simple key takeaway from listening to this podcast, then start to look at annual reports. And you don't have to go through all the numbers. You just have to look at the 10, 15 pages that are more about strategy. And sometimes it's less than that. And you find a lot of super valuable information there. So we have had comments like when we go and see a client, they go, "Oh, you know more than most of my staff about us, and the only thing you've done, because most staff, if you work in a Fortune 500 company, I mean, I would bet money on that 95% of the staff never read the annual report, so they're not up to date with the strategy, they're not up to date with all the details. So as soon as you do that and you meet someone senior, they get easily impressed. I mean, almost all high performers do it. So if you're competing with really competitive people, you will not be unique doing this. But on the contrary, if you don't do it, you're out. So that's an important and easy takeaway from this podcast, is to start reading annual reports and trying to figure out what the strategy is from your target for your target account, and what kind of key initiatives they have that are backing up that strategy.
Great advice. Thank you. So what do you see as the future? How are things heading in your mind in a year or 5 years from now? What are we going to be talking about from a strategy perspective, from a technology perspective, from a legal privacy issues perspective, as far as ABM goes?
The last point you're raising is pretty key. So most kind of new and innovative things I see in ABM are kind of gray zone from a privacy point of view. And since I'm European, GDPR is obviously very present for us, like the data protection law. And many international American companies need to be compliant with that as well, even though they're US based. So that is, some really, I'm a very active investor in MarTech, and coming like, yeah, you've been involved in a lot of MarTech companies. I want to have you as an investor. And they go through a brilliant idea, but it's immediately like, yeah, but that's too intrusive. They're like, is it? Like, yeah. So I think that what you'll see in the next 10 years is a big balance act and a battle between robotization, data, and privacy. Kind of those three battling. Robotization and data are kind of hand in hand, but many of the smart automations and the really clever stuff that you can do around an account quickly becomes sensitive to privacy. One of the things I've done, which I think is part of the future of ABM, so I'm a fairly large investor in a rather young account-based marketing company called InSync, but has quickly grown several 100% several years in a row, where it's kind of started off with display advertising through IP, and then InSync also added all the 4 social channels. So you can both target all employees via IP numbers, but then you can and display advertising, but then you can also target via social posts using selections of people inside those accounts. It's a really smart setup where you get the best of the 4 social media channels and display advertising. And then they've integrated AdRapid, which is actually another investment of mine. It's an embedded platform for ads and ad templates. So like Banner Snack and Banner Flow, but completely built to be embedded into other platforms. So all of a sudden, in one user interface, you can decide, okay, I want to target this account. I want to have, out of the 100 messages and ads we have, I want to use this 7. I want it to be visible both in normal media online, but also in the 4 social media channels. This is how you kind of often want to run account-based marketing. Then on top of that, you want to do some stuff that are more like in-mail and email, but at least the media part of account-based marketing, you want to be run synchronized. So InSync with a Z, they have done this really in a really smart way. So they're gaining momentum now, and a lot of the guys that are only doing IP and some smart data stuff are not covering enough, because most people, I'm sure you've noticed this, we tend to spend more and more percentage of our time on the social channels and less on the regular media channels. So if you're not incorporating your social channels in your account-based marketing program, it quickly becomes too weak. So with display advertising by IP, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, those 4 combined with IP and display is really powerful. So maybe that's it's not super duper ultra innovative, but it's kind of close to how you want it to run, and you don't have to have a big orchestra of people to manage it. You can run it with very few people.
Smart. I've heard good things about
industrialize IBM. Sorry, not IBM. ABM. Industrialize ABM is critical. I mean, moving it, like we talked about before, moving it into behaviors, daily habits, like has to be an integral part of your everyday work, and then it has to be easy to manage and has to cover many things in one go.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Facebook for B2B, but one of the challenges it seems is Facebook is a B2C sort of a product. I mean, that's how I position myself on Facebook.
Yeah, no, totally. So, but the thing is, what you get with Facebook and Instagram is frequency. So LinkedIn is in theory the ultimate tool for B2B and for targeting. I mean, you can do really sophisticated selections, as you know, in LinkedIn. But a lot of people are way too infrequently at LinkedIn. So if you want to influence them, you cannot rely on LinkedIn. You need to blend it. So you kind of use the strength of LinkedIn, but you then use that to build a bridge into also Instagram and Facebook. And what we see anyway is some really good results combining these, even though they are seen as consumer channels, but they have such a high frequency and also lower price per exposure that it kind of makes sense. But then it doesn't mean it's for all. But what we've done in InSync is that you can choose. You say, okay, I want to use display and LinkedIn and Twitter. That's the three I want to use. Someone want to say, okay, I want to use display, Instagram and Facebook. That's fine as well. You can make whatever combination you want. But the key is that more and more people are spending an awful lot of time on social media and less on traditional online media. And LinkedIn, as the kind of ultimate B2B channel, has too low frequency for too high proportion of all the people you want to influence. So to bridge that, you need to mix it. That's how I see it will move forward. I also see some really smart tools on how to automate. So there's one company cooking. It's not even launched, but I'm an advisor there, where it's kind of creating marketing automation, but social media based. So much like the Eloquas and the Marketos, and they're fundamentally built around email, even though they try to branch out into multi-channel, but it's still, you can see the heritage of email in there. Whereas there's a new genre of marketing automation companies that are more in mail and Facebook messaging. I mean, the social media channels are the core of the product and not an extension. Right. That's also something, because social selling, enterprise style, is really complementary to account-based marketing if you want to win bigger deals. It's really working well.
Interesting.
In our book, we have a lot on how to combine those.
Beautiful. Is that company in stealth mode, or are you able to share who that is?
So InSync is not in stealth mode. That's the account-based marketing company. The marketing automation company for social media, I mean, kind of built around social media. It does include email and all the others, but that's in stealth mode still. But I will probably be on the board of some, I mean, either chairman or board member of that company. And it's a real balance act to not become about GDPR, not to become too intrusive, but it's kind of finding that balance of how close you can come without breaking the law.
Yep, makes sense. Beautiful. Well, this has been awesome, Christopher. Any final words of wisdom? Otherwise, I'll let you go enjoy those wonderful kids.
I think keep it simple and try to scale it, and then it's so tempting to overcomplicate it and then get stuck in details, not getting anywhere. So that's my 10-year of ABM experience.
Great advice. Thank you. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in Boston next month.
Yeah, that will be a pleasure. I truly look forward to it. And Boston is such a cool town. One of my best friends went to Harvard there, and I was there for one of my most fun weeks ever. Was at Harvard Business School as a guest.
It's a good town. It's a good town.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. It's a pleasure, Christopher. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Cool. Take care.
Take care.